Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on the social responsibility and the player protection hosted by the iGaming Academy. iGaming Academy is the accredited training service provider. Our expertise run across compliance and vocational training for the gambling industry employees to help operators meet their training requirements when it comes to money laundering, social responsibility, and other areas. We help gambling operators to train their personnel in more than 10 different jurisdictions. My name is Julia, and I am the head of compliance on the iGaming Academy. Here on the call, you can also see Gabriella, who is our head of content and learning development. And we're very pleased to introduce our partners from the 87%. And Andy, we're very happy to see you today. Can you please tell us a couple of words about what you do in the 87%?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Julia. I'm Andy Bibby. I'm the CEO of 87%, and we are an organization that focuses on improving the well-being of individuals through measurement. So we work a lot with all sorts of organizations right around the world in helping them understand the well-being of their people and then putting in place plans and things that they can do to improve that. And I'm really glad to be joined by one of our lead psychologists, Caroline Outerside. So Caroline, maybe you could introduce yourself.
Hi, yes, I'm Caroline Outerside. I've got a background of about 20 years in mental health in a variety of settings. I've been on board, those settings have been government and NHS and personal business as well. And I've been on board with 87% for about 6 years now, acting in a mental health consultant type role, writing information for our partner businesses, for their staff about how to keep mentally well and healthy.
That's amazing, Caroline. That's great that you have so many years of experience, and mental well-being is extremely important, not only in the gambling industry, but across other industries now as well. Gaby, would you please tell us a little bit more about the partnership we just established earlier this year? I think it's very exciting.
Definitely, Julia, and I agree with you in saying that is a very exciting partnership, and I would say quite a unique partnership for iGaming Academy. So we launched our partnership back in May during the Mental Health Awareness Week in the UK. Now, the scope for us launching during this period was because our collaboration does focus on promoting education around player protection and employee well-being. I think the topic of player protection was definitely the driving force for our collaboration with 87%, giving the expertise around mental well-being, as both Andy and Caroline have explained. We've also seen, and I think this is across the board, a lot more stringent requirements of operators or of being imposed on operators by the regulators, particularly the UK Gambling Commission. I think everyone would agree. And we just really wanted to do our bit by developing a suite of courses dedicated to this in order to support our clients' social responsibility efforts in safeguarding the mental well-being of their customers.
Well, yeah, indeed. We currently see that gambling regulations are quite widespread, and they vary from one jurisdiction to the next. But without any doubt, operators' social responsibility has been always in the very center and the spotlight of all gambling requirements. And currently, we can clearly see the trends to introduce more requirements on the player protection side. Precisely customer interaction and the customer communication may be called differently in different jurisdictions. And one of the countries who is really paving this way is UK, where you have the requirement to communicate with the customers who might be demonstrating the signs of distress or might be at risk of developing the problem gambling or being in their way to the addiction. And we believe that it's quite difficult to meet the requirements at this stage because they're not quite clear within the regulation. And do you think that operators invest enough effort in responsible gaming? Do you think there are some challenges or maybe gaps that they are not quite ready to address?
Well, I think from where we sit as a training provider to the gaming industry, I think it's fair to say that, our clients, operators really are doing their bit and investing a lot of time and effort in ensuring that they've got the right policies and procedures in place to ensure their staff have the right knowledge to carry out their jobs with confidence, without any ambiguity or uncertainty. We see them also investing in responsible gambling training around different regulations in the different markets they do operate in. But as you mentioned, Yulia, there's a lot of change we are seeing with new requirements being imposed on operators. And I think this is where things become a bit tricky for operators. It's trying to keep up with those ever-changing regulatory environments, and also ensuring that they are meeting these requirements. And in doing that, they need to make sure their staff, especially their customer-facing employees, have the tools they need in order to do that. So in all of this, I think with all the changes we are seeing, I do feel that potentially, in addition to all of these things we are already seeing our clients do and other operators do, I do think that potentially customer-facing employees could require further training on different aspects of responsible gambling.
This makes sense, because being the customer-facing employee, so being in the customer support team or responsible gambling team, obviously requires some additional soft skills to meet the requirements of the role, because not all the gambling companies' employees are ready to come face-to-face with the problem gamblers or potential problem gamblers, people just experiencing the signs of problem gambling. It also might impact their own well-being quite a lot due to the nature of this communication and some negative feelings or triggers that might be associated with that. I believe that currently employers pay more attention to the well-being of their own employees in general, both in gambling industry and in other industries as well. Andy, as I know, you do provide an opportunity to the companies to measure the well-being of their employees. Could you please elaborate and tell us what trends you see, and do you believe that companies are in general more concerned recently on the well-being and the impact of the employment that is on the individual well-being and life balance?
Yeah, we saw, so we started the organization in 2017, really understanding that employers had a really important role to play in supporting the well-being of their employees. Now, then we went through COVID, the global pandemic, and we really saw a lot of organizations putting in the basic steps to support the well-being of their people. These were employee assistance programs, particularly popular here in the UK. But since the pandemic, we've actually seen that organizations have been questioning the investments that they made, not because they think those investments were not good, but actually we haven't seen an increase generally in well-being, even though we've seen a lot more investment. So organizations are really now turning to companies like ours and really thinking about, okay, well, we would like to measure the impact that we're having. We want to make sure that the money that we're spending is spent in the right ways, because we know that when you look after your employees are looking after your customers. And that's exactly where we are here, the sort of dual benefits to this training. Actually, maybe even three benefits when you think about it. You're helping your customer-facing employees really understand that individual at the other end. You're also helping them gain skills for themselves, which they can use in their personal lives. If you think about, recognizing, responding to emotional distress, those are really important life skills, and that also helps teamwork and the organization itself in their culture. So we think measurement is important to that, and that's very much what we put at the heart of that. But it's really about making sure that all of the areas that can benefit see that benefit, and that's why this training not only is about that individual in the end customer, but also helps your own culture.
This makes sense. Great, actually. Caroline, I might have a question to you as a psychologist. So we say that preparing an employee for the role is crucially important, not only for their understanding of the player and the customer on the other side of the screen, but also helping yourself to manage your own feelings. Why do you believe it is so important to explain the nature of addiction and the nature of problem gambling? How does it help the employee to manage their own reactions and maybe triggers and create more empathetic attitudes towards the person they communicate with?
That if the player protection person has a full understanding of how addiction, the knowledge of addiction and the risks attached to that can lead to a person's life becoming difficult in the areas of their finances, their family, their health, their work. And to understand that this is actually an illness, that your brain, the sort of rational, logical thinking part of your brain is, and the bit that determines risk and judgment, that actually becomes impaired when we're emotionally charged, when we're mentally unwell. There's a bit of an overlap between mental health and addiction in the sense of how it affects our brain. So our emotional centers become very on edge, very threat protection based. So that means people can interact with you in a difficult way. They might have short attention spans, they might not concentrate, they might be snappy, or any of the other symptoms of anxiety and depression. But if the player protection person understands that this is an illness that affects this prefrontal cortex, that the rest of us have a combination of the two, so we can sort of calm ourselves down. But a person with an addiction issue, they won't be able to do that. It can be impaired to the extent of having an accident. I think some of the research has shown this. Addiction impairs our ability to think in a reasoned way as much as someone who may have had an accident, an injury to their prefrontal cortex. And this takes the sort of fault off the person for the person interacting with them, and can increase their empathy for them to see that this is out of their control, it is an illness. And it's been reclassified, as an addiction as opposed to an impulsive disorder, which might sort of put the blame more on the person. So I think really understanding, how addiction is very powerful, and the processes behind it, the dopamine and the reward centers, and understanding how that affects someone can really just help that person interact in a much more empathic way.
It's very interesting. I think when you understand these processes, you learn not to take it personal, and you learn how to look in the situation slightly different. Well, indeed, completely different when you understand that the person cannot really help it and it's not their fault. It removes lots of stigmatization from the situation you're in, and it explains maybe the reasons why a person is behaving this way or another, and why they are demonstrating the signs of distress and maybe behaving inappropriate in your opinion, but it's just their way of explaining that they might have a problem. How would you recommend to communicate with these people who are demonstrating some signs of distress, or maybe the signs of problem gambling during the conversation?
It is to be aware of your own feelings. I think in order to manage this, you've got to have some emotional intelligence. And obviously one of the modules is all about empathy and emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness in the moment. So to be able to identify and understand how you are feeling, and then you can then be able to offer a calm and soothing interaction for the person, often by maybe validating what they might be feeling, if you can understand some of the signs and symptoms or how the person is, some words around some of those feeling words, that you can understand what's happening, but that you would like to help them solve this problem together. You are there as a support mechanism. But to be able to offer this sort of advice and support, you have to be in a calm and sort of alert enough to be able to do your job properly. This is the balance. So you're not going to be zenned out, of course, but using that sort of emotional intelligence about your own feelings, their feelings, and bringing the empathy in as well. And with empathy, it's a combination of what we call cognitive empathy, which is being able to put yourself in their shoes in a thinking perspective and see the situation from their point of view, and emotional empathy, which is more about maybe using a past experience that might help you understand the situation they're in.
All right. Thank you, Caroline. It's very interesting. How do you believe this communication might impact the employee themselves? Because sometimes you are not aware why you feel certain things, why something triggers you, why you might feel uncomfortable in talking to people, because it's quite emotionally extensive when you need to hear about people's like problems, their struggles with the gambling activity, and also take one step further, calm yourself down and provide an advice. It's very difficult. Do we have any information about how these customer-facing roles are affected emotionally a little bit more than people who are whose job is not connected with their direct contact?
Yeah, I think we can be triggered, if you like, by all sorts of situations, interactions. And when you're interacting with people who've had life difficulties, if their mental health's poor or they are problem gamblers, it might be something as simple as it's someone that reminds you of your own family member, you know, a son or a daughter or a partner. It might be something about them, the tone of their voice, which then could, you know, obviously trigger some feelings. You know, that might be in a positive way because it makes you feel like you want to help them. But equally, we can get triggered at a subconscious level by voices and interactions with people that remind you of something, that sort of dig into some of your personal triggers, maybe certain values or just certain things. It's like a subconscious transaction, if you like, that we're familiar with from somewhere in our past. This is why we all get defensive, because someone brings that out. It's a reminder of a past event. Call it transference in therapy. And it's just that someone reminds you, but you don't know they remind you of that because this is at a deeper level. So this is where then you might suddenly maybe take something more personally in that role and find yourself getting a bit worked up, shall we say, irritable, and wanting to sort of speak back more firmly to the person or something. Is that what you mean? Is it that sort of how, and
yes,
then maybe,
yeah, exactly.
So I think awareness, and awareness of this process is a huge step in you know, getting in the way of that. Really is.
So being aware of your own feelings. Sorry, Andy.
Oh yeah, I was just going to add, I was thinking, Caroline, also, if you're being exposed to this kind of these stories day in, day out, and you also may have things going on in your life, it's important that self-awareness is really critical in being able to separate out and make sure you focus on your job and helping those customers, as well as just being aware about those feelings that you know that are perhaps being exposed through those conversations. So the training certainly is going to help both individuals, if you like, have a good conversation.
And it's about blending that awareness with some tools and techniques, which is what we've done in the courses. So the awareness plus, I can do this, I can say it like this, or I can spot a sign here. This makes me think this person, if they're depressed, this is what I might be helpful next. So yes, it's a combination of the two things. And I think that it's really important for self-care, for people to understand they need to be able to manage their own well-being in these roles. Is really important, because there will be an element of compassion fatigue as well, like we hear in the sort of helping professions, because you're being exposed to some personal traumas, and when that builds up, you know, that can start to affect a person emotionally. So to be able to build some self-care around all the areas of looking after yourself emotionally, physically, sleep, rest, diet, as well as you know, making sure that your life, you know, does what you want it to do, that you're sort of working in a meaningful way, and looking after yourself, really, getting your needs met.
Perfect. That is amazing. So To help employees to prepare for this role, we need to increase their awareness and provide them with the sort of training so that they can understand their own feelings and also the feelings and the circumstances and maybe the difficult periods of time that the players and customers might be coming through. But also we see that the training requirements are not quite clear yet on the customer interaction side, especially in the jurisdictions where the customer interaction was already introduced, but not quite detailed from the regulatory perspective. We know that there is a requirement to try to identify the problematic players at the early stages and then interact or communicate with them as early as possible in several jurisdictions, not only the UK, but also including Malta now and the Netherlands. But the problem is that we're not always sure what approach to take in preparing the employee for the role, because some people might not be suitable for these roles in general, even if they go for the training, just due to some personal maybe some personal attitude to problem gambling, maybe their past experiences, inability to be empathetic towards particular situations in their life. So the awareness around the requirements for the role is quite important as well, and it needs to be provided to the employee before they step into the field. Gabby, how do you think we might prepare the employees for the role in general? So what do they need to know before they even say, yes, I'm happy to be in the responsible gambling team and I might be ready to take the challenge and come face to face with the players when they're happy or not? I'm happy to handle any situation.
Yeah, Yulia, I understand what you're asking here, and I suppose until one is officially in communication with a player, it's hard to know whether one is ready for the role and the responsibilities that come with that role. But all we can do is, prepare the staff leading up to this and during their onboarding, really ensure that we are educating them. I'm reiterating now, I think, what Caroline's discussed, educating them on the psychology around gambling addiction and suicide awareness so that they have a better understanding of these subject areas and these phenomena, so that they are more emotionally intelligent and they can start to develop this emotional intelligence that they will then in turn use and grow their empathy when speaking with customers. And it is through doing this, it's through, I think, making the topics in themselves more tangible that creates that awareness there. So I think we need to take a step back from, all the policies and procedures staff do need to go through. Now, it's extremely important, and I'm not taking away from that, but we need to give it a more human approach. The policies and the procedures are key. Training on the regulations is key, but we really need to kind of do a bit more than that and, focus on those soft skill elements that are so crucial in a customer facing role. So not just educating them on problem gambling and gambling addiction and all of these things, educating them on these factors, but then also providing them the right tools to use during those communications. So there's so many different styles and techniques one can use that we do talk about in some of our training that become really useful. It's good to have these tools at hand so that when you are having a conversation with a potential problem gambler or player at risk, that you know what would work best in this particular situation and how to manage that customer who might be appearing very angry during the call. It's not anger directed at the customer facing employee, although it may feel like that as a representative of the operator, but it's obviously a lot more deep rooted in that. And this is where I think we really need to train staff to give them those tools to see whether or not they are, ready for what this kind of role entails.
But apart from the communication modules and also the, let's say, some training on the general awareness around the concept of problem gambling, we now face, I would say, the necessity to also increase the awareness around the suicide topic, because the research is not on our side. In some jurisdictions, the research shows that approximately 6 to 12% of gamblers develop problems with managing their gambling and then might be exposed to the harms associated with this. And from this percentage of people affected by unhealthy relationship with their gambling and not taking gambling as an entertainment, approximately 2%, which is again quite a big amount, I believe, would have some suicide ideation and might be in a risk area for self-harm. So do we know how to address these issues right now? Is it okay to talk about these topics? Is it necessarily to explain these things to our employees and let them know that the situation might arise and they will have to take action and raise these conversations with customers?
No, 100%, Yulia. So, I mean, the stats speak for themselves. Suicide as a cause of problem gambling is a reality. And you're 100% right in bringing this up. It's not just about educating around gambling addiction and other aspects that form part of that. But, you know, suicide does need to be a topic that is spoken about. It's quite taboo. I feel that sometimes we may tiptoe around the subject of suicide, but it's there. And I feel that if we are training staff on this topic, on this reality, then they will be more geared up to recognize the signs of a person, you know, who's maybe potentially having these suicide ideations, whether it's just thinking about it or quite readily wanting to act on it. It's so important that, you know, employees are ready to pick up on these signs and understand how to manage that conversation with the individual. Now, you mentioned, you know, should we be talking about this? And yes, we should. And I'm pretty sure Caroline would have a lot more to say on the topic of suicide. But yes, you know, asking a player or anyone if they are thinking about suicide is not going to plant the idea of suicide in that person's mind. It really is helping them to pave the way to a way of, you know, healing and, you know, taking the right steps in the right direction to get the help they need.
I think that's right. We have seen, you know, from my own kind of untrained brain, it may not be a single event that causes something. So it might not just be problems with gambling, but it's when a few things tend to build up, and that's where that kind of emotional intelligence, those communication styles, where you're able to understand that individual and perhaps what other things are going on in their lives. Because if they've got 3 or 4 different negative events going on in their life, one of them may be, you know, a losing streak in gambling, which they're normally under control, they would normally be able to cope with. But when it's combined with a few different things, then that's when it becomes a problem. And I should probably hand over to the expert to talk a little bit more about that. But that's my own kind of what I've learned over the last few years working with experts like Caroline.
No, you've all talked really eloquently about it, and I completely support both of what you've said there. We do have to talk more about it. We do have to break the stigma. There are a lot of myths and misunderstandings around suicide that people think you should and shouldn't say. And I think one of the strongest is, oh, if I mention it, it might plant an idea. And it's really important to get around that, because that gets in the way of us giving the help that's needed. So as soon as there are any signs, and using intuition as well in areas like this, there's nothing wrong with just asking and asking again. Sometimes a first ask doesn't get, you know, that person might clamp down first of all, we're not going to say this, but just another opportunity afterwards, it relays a bit of empathy, a bit more concern, and then they're more likely to say it. But Andy, as well, what you're saying about the mixture, it's a whole storm, isn't it? It's a real sort of melting pot of things that come together, and finances can be one of those real big triggers. I think if there's a great big loss that can really push the shame and the feelings of escape, and that being an only option. So it's really important that people see that there are other options, that there are help, and and people who actually, when you do address it, you're much more likely, people who talk about it, having ideation, will have people who don't talk about it, if you look at the other angle, are more likely to commit suicide. So when we give people the opportunity to get the help and they do speak, then it's more likely they will be helped and things will get better.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm very happy that you all mentioned that we should remove stigma, first of all, and be able to talk about this open. Because unfortunately, these are the realities of our life, and we need to do our best to be able to bring it up and provide the support and help as soon as possible.
Yeah.
But also, I'm very happy that Andy mentioned that problem gambling is not one of the is not the only factor that can contribute towards this, because we don't want to put more stigmatization on the gambling in general as the industry. And there are several factors, but the fact that the gambling employees sometimes can see these circumstances and unfortunate course of events in somebody's life is important in customer interaction, because the person may not have problems with the gambling per se, or the gambling can be just one of the several unfortunate courses of events which triggered this quite desperate attitude and difficult situations and suicidal ideation. There are lots of other vulnerabilities that problem gambling awareness team, responsible gambling team, will be able to notice, and these vulnerabilities should be always taken into account. The vulnerabilities can be social, educational, behavioral, and much more. Caroline, what do you think can be noticeable for the conversation with the players? Like, what can we notice when communicating with them? What can contribute to this quite black state of thoughts?
It is one of the symptoms of depression. So it is something that whenever you feel depressed, you might get some level of suicide ideation, and it might range from, I just don't want to be here, in a sort of just a fleeting sort of thought, or it can go along in stages, right, towards starting to think how you wouldn't want to be here anymore, that you actually actively want to make plans to carry out something like that. So depression is one of the first signs to look out for, and worthlessness, sort of a lot of talk around maybe feeling trapped in their life, feeling worthless. These are, and not having a sense of belonging. These are sort of areas that might indicate that that's a stronger presentation alongside depression, as to sort of three big areas why people might actually make that next step. So really, really important to pick out on those.
Indeed. Thank you very much. And I'm sure these might be quite difficult topic for the majority of the frontline employees to talk about.
Yeah, and can I just add, actually, one of the things is around that communication, and first of all, being able to put yourself in that active listening state, so that instead of thinking what you're going to say next, to be really in tune with listening, and so that the person really understands that through not being interrupted, etc. And how you say things, so the tone of your voice. So these are things that we would mention anyway around intelligent communication, but really important if you're trying to encourage someone and trying to find out that the depth of a problem in this sense around suicidality. So just wanted to sort of put that in there, because I know we haven't really mentioned that.
Thank you, Carol. That's actually a great piece of advice, just to come down and be able to listen and then provide the advice. I think it goes approximately the same with problem gambling. When you communicate with the player, to just let them know what's happening, to let them know about the amount of money they've been spending recently, about the gambling partners that might be concerning. So the first stage is always just to create awareness around the situation and let them know what you see without being judgmental. So you shouldn't see, we believe you have problem with gambling. You should address and say, we see the increased activity on your account. Like, do you believe you're gambling more because you might be going through a difficult period or something like this? So you should be able to, first of all, just bring it up to them without being judgmental and without providing your own your own opinion, because your own opinion is somewhere back in the background. So you shouldn't really put it forward. You need to let them know this is what we see and we're concerned. Like, do you want some help? Do you want to tell us a little bit more about how you can control your gambling experience? Do you believe that you might be spending not in your limits, and you might be increasing your own budget? So these sort of conversations are usually very supportive, and being able just to listen to their perception is quite important.
And it's support in solving a problem, which again is the other aspect of when you have mental health problems in combination with the gambling, is this inability to make decisions and think clearly about things. That is really impaired, and that's what I was talking about before when I said about the prefrontal cortex not quite being online. So this help from someone, this is often the way you can work with clients. It's breaking down problems. What's the next step? What's the next baby step to take? And that can feel quite empowering for someone then.
Thank you so much.
Certainly developing really good life skills. I mean, these are life skills. They're not just applied, when you're at work. Actually, the piece around kind of using your emotional intelligence, empathetic listening, these are critical for just leading a good life and helping all of those people around you, whether those are your family, your friends, your colleagues, and then of course you have a duty of care to your customers.
And one of the things that I thought when I was reviewing this was actually it's really good personal development for people to learn these things. I think your employees can really benefit from this, and people working on the front line. It might be tough, but I think there'll be definitely rewards.
It's so pleasant to hear positive feedback from a psychologist. And Gabby, well done to you and your team in developing the communication modules we have. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about these modules we were mentioning several times throughout this webinar?
Sure, yeah, we've definitely been mentioning them a few times throughout the webinar, but essentially both 87% and iGaming Academy have worked together to create this suite of player protection modules, which focus on 3 key themes. So they focus on problem gambling awareness, suicide awareness, and communication styles and techniques when dealing with customers who are either at risk of problem gambling or actually experiencing problems with their gambling. Each theme is made up of a series of bite-sized training, each focusing on a specific topic to that theme, and runs for no less or no more, I should say, than 10 to 15 minutes. So we really did want to create something quite different to our compliance suite of training, which we are obviously quite known for at this point, and just create something that is short, sweet, informative, and really helps the employee, whether a new starter or someone who's been working in the industry for a while, just to kind of take that step back, self-reflect on what they've learned, and understand in line with how they usually communicate with, doesn't just need to be a customer on the other end of the line, but even amongst friends, families, and just understand their own emotional intelligence level at that point in time. Just create a bit more awareness to problem gambling and suicide, as well as a dedicated module to managing difficult feelings within themselves. So I've kind of touched on this a bit throughout our conversation now, but obviously in having these difficult conversations with customers, this is bound to take its toll on the employee. So we really just wanted to create a module which sheds a bit of awareness and light to this, that you need to be self-aware to how these interactions are impacting you, and then what to do when you are feeling a bit emotionally run down, let's say.
Thank you, Gabby. Self-reflection is the key.
Definitely.
Anything you would love to add, like while we're still here?
Yeah, I think, the regulatory side on gambling is something that you are experts in and know certainly a lot more than I do. But we are seeing regulations start to come in, at least here in the UK, around general employee well-being, because of the strain that is putting on our own health system, and we know that around the world. We recently saw shortages of medication to do with mental well-being, and that's because it's it's a problem that is more global. And so I think for organizations to utilize this training certainly for their customer service staff is a really good step in the right direction, because as organizations take responsibility for that, then regulators can take a step back. But we are seeing that regulators are beginning to make noises, particularly we know in the autumn statement, which comes out from the UK government in November, that there's going to be quite a focus on mental health and well-being, and that is because there are so many people who are struggling and not able to get that help. And when you think about that as a fairly small minority of the population, we try and think about everybody and how everybody can improve their well-being. So, for me, my wrap up is this is a really good thing to do, not just from a regulatory point of view, but because it's really important that you support not just your customers, but your staff. And so I'm really proud of the partnership. I'm really proud of the content and that Caroline has led. I think it's superb, and I would encourage anyone to really think about that, but not just in a narrow way, but how it is going to improve your culture and everything that you do as an organization.
Thank you, Andy. That was a perfect wrap up, and I actually have nothing to add apart from we've been very happy to collaborate with you in this development, because your input was so much appreciated. You're wonderful experts, and you let us think about it from a different perspective, because before we used to focus more on the regulatory perspective, compliance requirements, but thinking about this from the psychological perspective definitely enhance our own understanding of the problem and how we might create the solutions for the employees. Thank you so much, Andy. Thank you, ladies. Caroline, it was extremely pleasant to talk to you. Your expertise is just amazing.
Thank
Well
you.
done.
Thank you.
Thank you.